Hey, don't worry, everybody. If you thought you might miss out on your annual chance to see Zinchenko defending Mohamed Salah, I think you might get your wish. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, feels like destiny, doesn't it? It is my density, my destiny to have Alexander Zinchenko defending Mohamed Salah 1v1 in a critical match. And we may well get that chance. So congratulations, everybody. That's where we seem to be. We will, of course, talk injuries and lineup and preview for Liverpool today. We're going to start with a little bit on what was, I think there's no other way to say it, a thrilling Champions League tie on Tuesday, and break down a little bit of what we thought about that. Maybe not so much beat for beat, but just the overall performance, a couple of individuals that may be relevant. And then, of course, how some injury stuff leads to us having some very big questions to answer against Liverpool. It does feel like another massive game. And I got to be honest, this has been a relentless start to the season because the games that were supposed to be sort of the relaxing ones have not been able to be. For reasons sometimes related to referees and sometimes related to ourselves. And in between those, we've just had nothing but big games. So the relentlessness continues this weekend. In case you can't tell, not in my normal recording environment, so hopefully sounding okay, looking okay. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a subscribe. If you're not watching on YouTube, which is obviously the majority of you, you're already subscribed, so I don't need to tell you anything. I will tell you that Phil Costa and I tomorrow are going to do our first 3 big questions episode over on Patreon and the Apple subscriber edition as well. Basically, that's where we take 3 big questions related to the Arsenal and attempt to answer them. It feels like there's about 7 big questions right now, but we're only going to do 3. Why 3, you ask? It's the name of the episode. So anyway, I hope everyone is well. Hope everyone's doing great. Enjoyed some Champions League games other than ours, if you had the chance to watch them. Somebody in the Discord said, thank you for doing instant reactions following the Arsenal match so that I was able to watch Real Madrid, Borussia Dortmund. So that's what we're here for, saving you from watching games like that. All right, here with you now is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stillman. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Laura Kirk-Francis joins the pod again. Great to have you back, Laura. She's on Twitter at LauraKirk12. How are you?
I'm good. I'm better. Better than maybe a couple of days ago, but not that much better.
Oh, we can fix that. Yeah, we can fix that. I promise. Do you find that the endorphins are still sort of draining out of you from Tuesday's match?
It was so thrilling. I could hardly sleep. So having to come down from that high of Tuesday, it's been a tough one, but it's part and parcel of being an Arsenal fan.
I can imagine. Look, all kidding aside, I do think it's a difficult situation, right? Because a very emotional game at the weekend passed, a very emotional weekend at the game coming up. And just judging by the Emirates crowd, you can kind of tell what the attitude about this match was. And maybe that permeated to the players a little bit. But maybe the game is slightly misunderstood in my mind because of a second half that was pretty turgid. I think there was maybe a positive first half here we can get stuck into. But Tim, I'll just ask you, first of all, what you made of the lineup. I know there were some people that were hoping to see Ethan Nwaneri, for example. And there was sort of a rush and an excitement to get him into the team. I think not just because he's an exciting young player, but because I think there's a perception that he can give the team back precisely the sort of spark in the attacking third that we've not had without Odegaard, or maybe not had to the fullest extent possible. Hard to judge with 10 men every game. Did you have any issues with who we picked? What was your overall sense of it?
Yeah, sure. Before I answer that, I do want to make a point on the kind of people putting their tickets on the exchange type thing. And as you put it very correctly, the attitude towards the game, I think it's an important point to make. These extra games make people's season tickets a lot more expensive. And the call for these extra games is not coming from fans at fucking all. Okay. So that is not where the demand is coming from. So the 2 people I sat with sold their tickets because Champions League nights, they're expensive and they would rather have the £85 back in their pockets, which I think is a very reasonable approach. So I think it's worth saying that we're playing more football now, and I don't think there's the demand for it. I think there is a complete saturation. So that aside...
Let me just say one thing on that too, because I don't want to be tone deaf to the people who would kill to go to any Emirates game, including preseason or any other that they can make it to. I understand there's still a huge demand globally for people that would have gladly gone to that game. But just to put in perspective, the sort of, I think, lack of interest or enthusiasm, I had some people come to me and be like, I've got one, I can't shift it, I'll give it away. And sort of I reached out to a network of people I know, and it's a weeknight, it wasn't a game people were desperate to get to. I couldn't shift a free ticket. Now, if you're listening, say, I would have taken it. I certainly apologize. But Tim, because I know there are people who will be listening from other places who would have killed to be at that game. But, by and large, the people that are able to go certainly seemed like this was one that they were happy to get on the exchange and get some money back for you.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're in that position, pick games like this because you'll get one. Basically, like don't try and come over for Liverpool because it's not happening. But this one you'll get one. But yeah, exactly. There's a complete saturation, and yeah. But anyway, on the lineup. I wasn't massively surprised. I wasn't necessarily expecting to see Nwaneri start. I think the thing is, I can't pretend I've got a massive reason not to, but at the same time, in my now quite lengthy experience, this just always without exception happens. Always. Every
Are there sometimes
example,
it doesn't happen to?
No, always happens, right? That whenever you have like an exciting kind of 17, 18-year-old player, everyone wants them in much earlier than the coach is willing to throw them in, without exception. And all the people you're screaming into your devices at me, I promise they didn't come into the team straight away. There was a cooling period before that. And I don't honestly know why that is, but there must be a reason, because it always happens and every coach does it across the elite level. It just always happens like that. So there must be good reasons, be they fitness, for example, be they just about general readiness. So I wasn't necessarily expecting to see Nwaneri. I completely understand that, like, clearly we're missing like a little bit of creative spark without Ødegaard and Saka as well. I think that's very important. It's kind of both of them, and we do look a little bit on the stodgy side. But yeah, I wasn't enormously surprised by anything. Maybe Gabriel Jesus on the right instead of Raheem Sterling. But then again, I think both of them, their stocks are both pretty low at the moment. Gabriel Jesus is probably a bit higher than Raheem Sterling. So the fact that they shared the game like 68-22, I think in the end, I don't think that looks great on either of them and where they are at the moment, to be honest. But that is just a kind of reality. So the other annoying thing about the Ødegaard and Saka dual injuries is that, like, ideally this might have been a nice night to give Kai Havertz the night off, because we're really asking a lot of him at the moment. But I kind of think the Preston game is next week, and I think probably in Arteta's mind he's thinking, like, you're all getting that off, basically, and Nwaneri will play and Lewis Skelly will play. And look, around this conversation, Lewis Skelly comes on ahead of Zinchenko at left back, right? So we did put a 17-year-old in. It's just not the 17-year-old that everyone's talking about. So yeah, I think there's some stuff around this that's probably a bit of a mystery to us, but it's utterly consistent with the approach of all managers I've ever known for eternity.
Not leaving the door ajar there at all, Tim, slamming it shut on anybody complaining. It is sort of funny, right, that we find ourselves in a situation of people rolling their eyes at Mikel for not using a 17-year-old while he has literally just used a 17-year-old. I guess technically an 18-year-old now. So touche, Elliot. But Laura, the game is a weird one because the second half leads to understandable frustration. But in the first half, I think we looked kind of like Arsenal in the sense that we absolutely swarmed them. We smothered them. We took the ball off them. And I think what has been one of the stories of this season is simply not converting enough of those moments to goals. I mean, there's a scenario where the big Calafiori chance goes in, for example, and this goes on to be a laugher. We just start banging goals in for fun against them. This team just doesn't feel like it's in a place to do that right now for one reason or another. But what do you think of that opening moment? And I have to say, and I get it, he has paid a lot of money to put the goal in the back of the net, 90 legs in his minutes, as Paul would say, to put the ball in the back of the net. But I still think Jesus did look quite encouraging and vibrant and was doing the thing that I think he is quite elite at, which is pressing and winning the ball back. So what did you think of that opening period where we were on top? And maybe if you were equally impressed as I was with I think Gabriel Jesus looking a little bit better.
Yeah, I think the first half of the first half, I feel like I've seen that script. I feel like I've seen that film before. It's really, we are 100% in control. But I think the difference this season is that we're creating half chances, but there's no kind of real confidence that we're going to go into half time 2-0 up. And I think it was such a weird atmosphere. And I think Tim, you said this on the pod after Bournemouth, that game should have been a like a palate cleanser. That should have been that kind of separation after the Bournemouth game where we rid ourselves of the nightmare. And there were times during the first half where I thought, right, here we go. We're creating loads of chances. They haven't had a sniff of the ball. One goes in, the floodgates open. And it just didn't happen. And I feel like we've seen that a few times. And even last year, at this same time last year, the sort of pre-Christmas run-up, we might remember it fondly, but there were times where we were very dominant, but actually not punishing teams, not punishing them for mistakes, and not going into the half 3-0 up, which is what we probably thought we were entitled to. I thought Jesus was good. In that first half, he was on the side of the pitch that I sit on, and you could see how much not respect that Shakhtar were giving him, but he was clearly causing a problem every time he got the ball. I think there was perhaps a little bit of a disconnect with Ben White. I don't know if that's just because they've not played together recently in that formation. There were a few times Ben White went on the overlap, Jesus cut inside, but he certainly looked a bit closer to what we might expect from him. Clearly was causing issues. But the fact that he still just can't get a goal, it's so frustrating to watch. It's particularly when he's shifting the defence, he's making the types of runs and he's dribbling the ball and he looks dangerous, but the finishing is just generally really poor. I can't make any more excuses for him. It just sucks.
Yeah.
And so that's that first half felt like a very classic Arsenal game, but with that added kind of weirdness of a very flat atmosphere. And I totally echo what Tim said. There's a lot of noise about people selling their tickets, but it is expensive. And, it's a Tuesday night. I know people are absolutely screaming to go, but that was your chance. There were tickets there. It was quite a muted but controlled first half, I'd say. And we are still, I think, expecting to have that kind of dominant sort of possession convert into goals, but it doesn't at the moment, and that's why we are essentially kicking ourselves in the face.
Yeah, I do think that you have to be flexible to do that, by the way. I do think that the fans were trying to lift the team at times. I don't have any problem with that from what I heard. I think you can kind of sum up the whole night, frankly, just by the end of the game. I don't know if people saw this, but the Vamos flag, the Arteta Vamos flag that goes up, the Tifo was backwards, which I think just sort of sums up the way the whole thing felt a little bit. Laura, I'll stay with you for a second because you mentioned him. Ben White, I keep using, and probably rightly so, fitness as an excuse to not really evaluate where he's been this season because I'm not convinced he's fully fit. But at some point, if you're playing, you have to be evaluated. And it has been, I think, a stop-start season for Ben White, obviously. And I don't think his performances when he's been out there have convinced. Did you have any concern about Ben White? I mean, look, it is a valid thing to say a player is not fully fit. But at some point, if they're playing, they have to be evaluated. And I find myself not totally convinced by him at the moment.
I think he's been able to fly a little bit under the radar because we've had bigger issues. And so, his perhaps slightly under par performances have kind of gone unnoticed. There was, I think, one or two moments where he lost the ball. The specific one, I think he had lost the ball slightly higher up the pitch and you could see him struggling to get back, which to me says maybe you're playing at 90, 95%. And we were lucky that, with no disrespect to the opposition, we were not punished, but it was slightly uncomfortable watching. And when he was subbed off, there was a bit of, is it injury? Is it tactical? We'd obviously got that yellow card. It's one to keep an eye on, I think. But as I said, because we've had so much drama elsewhere on the pitch, he's sort of got away with it a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a rest for the Preston game, etc. But then again, we're running out of players to play in this position. So
yeah, he can't rest. He may even have to play center back. I mean, it's an interesting one, right? Because Mikel said, just Mikel's words, that he took him off because he was on a yellow, and we've had some accidents recently, you might say, and he didn't want to play with 10 men again, which I think is smart. But I have to admit, if that is completely accurate, I think it says a little something that he's willing to go party at right back over just trusting Ben White to play on a yellow card for another half of football. Now, again, he might be covering a little bit for Ben White not being fully fit, and I want to allow for that. Tim, I think we can move swiftly ahead to to maybe the player who was probably the star player in the match, and that's Gabriel Martinelli. He gets a goal that I think his performance deserved. And it just feels like the anti-Jesus, because I think Jesus was bright, but it just doesn't go for him in the final third. And Martinelli cuts in, fires toward the near post, gets a little friendly deflection, then gets another deflection off the post and off the keeper and in. And everybody's praising Martinelli's night and probably not doing the same for Jesus, even though I think the contributions at times were maybe of a similar vein. But the frustration with Jesus is fair. I just want to be clear. When you've gone as long as he's gone without scoring, you're really going to struggle to get people to line up and point to the bright spots. I mean, it's stretched out so long now. But Martinelli's certainly back in fine fettle, and like he's a player we know has big games against Liverpool, so the timing looks good. What did you think of his performance, his goal, and anything else about sort of him rounding into form that you observed?
Yeah, it's been in keeping with how he's been playing this season. I think he's played really well for pretty much the whole season, and I do think that's kind of full credit to him, because he did lose form a bit last season, and like there were caveats for that, like the left side's a bit of a mess. We're playing 4 different left backs. He had injuries and stuff like that, but it does come to a stage where you kind of say, well, how many excuses, factors, whatever you want to say, like how many and how long can you do that? And so to feel like a big season for him, and I've said it before, I think the performances in the industry and the effort came first and the end products followed it. And I think that's a pretty natural progression. I think for example, Raheem Sterling might be able to learn something from that. And with Gabriel Jesus, I do see the industry and the effort. I see maybe what we saw with Martinelli a month or two ago, where it was like, this guy just needs one to go in, kind of thing. Because Jesus did look decent in pre-season, and then he gets that injury, and I think that's kind of ruined things for him. But Martinelli, really, really good, and make no mistake, we need him at the moment, because if you haven't got Ødegaard, you haven't got Saka, like, you start to run out of guys who can win you games.
Yeah.
And so we need him. We need him to really kick on. And I wrote a piece today just about like a few things that I'm looking for in the second quarter of the season. And one of them's about Martinelli. And I kind of said, I feel like he's roughly back to where he was. But now I want to see him go right, like, I was expecting to see him where he was for the last 6 months or so. So, I kind of don't want him to settle on that. I want it to be, okay, now, back towards like the supernova level that a lot of us think you can get to. But I think one thing you'll always get with Martinelli, you'll always get that effort, you'll always get that industry. And, he has a really nice setup for Trossard as well, where he kind of rolls his studs over the ball and puts a cross in. And that's a bit of a confidence play right there. I don't think we'd have seen him do that a month ago. But also Martinelli quite enjoys the Champions League. I think, I don't know, like, because Shakhtar weren't exactly expansive, so I can't exactly say, oh, it's just because you get more space, because I don't think Shakhtar were giving more space, especially, but he does seem quite cut out for Champions League games. He's had quite a few big performances there now over the last year. So yeah, really good to see him back to where he was, particularly coming up against Liverpool. And yeah, make no mistake, we need him at the moment, big time.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Like, I understand what Clive means when he says he don't think in terms of first 11s and don't think in terms of, first choice 11s. I totally get that. And I love Clive. I think in terms of first 11s. I can't help myself. I do it. And like, I really, really think, and nobody wants to hear woe is us, we've been unlucky. But I think the injuries and the red cards and the bans as a result of those red cards has meant that this team just looks so disjointed at times. And what do you expect? You start the game with Ben White at right back and a midfield that, honestly, this is probably the lineup I would have picked for Bournemouth. One less behind the ball player, one less center mid, one more attacker. That's probably what I would have done. This game, we pick it. By halftime, we've got to change it, and now it's Partey at right back, and it's Merino in midfield, and all of a sudden, Partey, who's the one guy that's given us some of that ball progression and cohesion in midfield all season, he's out of the midfield, and now Rice's role is changing again. Kai's had to play multiple roles. Leo Trossard out wide for Bournemouth, back to sort of the middle nominally in this game, a reconfigured back four every game, 10 men sometimes, converted midfielders to right back other times. Like, it's really, really bad. And all this, by the way, while playing without the two best players. If you take Mohamed Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold out of Liverpool, they're just not going to be as good. They're just not, period. I mean, Manchester City, right? You take one player, Rodri, out, and all of a sudden, what's everyone saying? They can't win the title without Rodri. One player. Meanwhile, we're without Saka and Odegaard and whatever player they've banned because of a red card. So I really want to be careful not to make it sound like excuse making, but I think the expectation that we were somehow going to look like a 92, 93 point team every time we took the pitch with these reconfigured teams is an expectation that I don't regard as particularly realistic, although I accept it's the job and we have to do it. And oh, by the way, we got to do it at the weekend, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. Laura, into the second half here, we got the goal, we got the lead. I still think that one of the things that happens with this team, and maybe you can diagnose for me why this is, I think we are maybe a little too comfortable at times to sit off. Now, I understand we can go terrorismo ball or whatever the kids are calling it these days, where we, the dirtiest, filthiest, low block 4-4-2 and no one can get through and it's a meme and we think it's funny, but like that's not what you're supposed to be doing at home against Shakhtar, right? Like I think sometimes we get the balance wrong of low blocking it and countering versus having the ball. And I tend to like when we have the ball and when we control the game and control the territory. I think last season we did a lot of that. This second half started to sort of drift away from us. And I think part of it is just that loss of the impetus, that loss of the control and the intention to play. So, for me, that is something I'd like to see us do less. Am I overthinking this or do you have maybe a diagnosis for why maybe we see that with Arsenal at times this season and we did against Shakhtar?
I think what shocked me in that second half was how easily they progressed the ball through our midfield. And I don't know whether that was a symptom of, that's fine, we are literally just going to let them do that, and we're happy with it. Or it's a symptom of actually because we have a completely new set of players and a new formation on the pitch after half time, the sense that I got from it is that we were kind of chasing our players rather than actually getting back into formation. And I completely agree. I'm not quite sure why you would say to them, sit off Shakhtar. They offered very little. But particularly when Partey was moved out of that midfield, not only did we lose that momentum going forward, there was just a massive hole in the midfield. It was shocking how quickly they were able to essentially counter-attack us from the edge of their box very quickly to making an attack on our goal. And I'm not sure if that's, particularly on Tuesday, whether that's tactical or it's actually just we are, first thing first, we're slow to react, and second, we are not sure what formation we need to get in by the time that we actually get back behind the ball. To your point around us being comfortable, I completely agree. And it's one of the things that I think will send me to an early grave, which is just being so frustrated with Arsenal going 1-0 up, even 2-0 up, and then somehow being like, right, job's a good one, we're done here. Like, we'll just pop ourselves behind the goal. We've got a 2-goal lead. There's no need to score anymore. And that's frustrating for so many reasons. One, because you're inviting pressure, we're inviting risk, and every single team now, I think, are starting to realise what Arsenal are doing and that we can be as solid as we like defensively, but actually when we start to sit back, we adopt this kind of like slightly panicky last-ditch defending, which creates this sense of panic, despite the fact we'll be very comfortably 2-0 up, controlling the game. But because we're sitting so deep, it sort of invites that pressure. And particularly some of the, lower teams that are lower down in the Premier League will go, that's a way that we can actually get to Arsenal, is we might be 2-0 down, but we know that they have a bit of a tendency to drop off, to relax, to invite more pressure than they should. So that's an opportunity for us. And I think by the end of that game, there was jeopardy. There was genuine jeopardy, not just from that kind of like last sort of save in the 92nd minute, but throughout the second half, they could very easily nick one on the counter here because all we're doing is chasing.
Yeah, and let's be honest. Like Mikel said, we were tired, and I buy that. I mean, playing with 10 men is exhausting, and then you go out on a Tuesday, and you got to play Champions League after chasing around with 10 men at the weekend, and so, the players that are being relied on have a lot of minutes in their legs at this point. Quickly on Merino, Tim, any thoughts? Like we've only seen flashes of him in some reconfigured midfields and maybe not under the best circumstances. I find my eye falling more on Declan Rice, who I think I'd like to see maybe a little more personality and control from to really get his foot on the ball and help us control possession. But, all in all, I think people are trying to size up Merino a little bit. So what have you made of him, and what do you make of him against Shakhtar?
Yeah, quite vanilla. Really, I think the thing is probably going to be for him that he's just going to make more sense in a team that's got Ødegaard and Saka in it. Sorry to come back to that again, but certainly the midfield with Ødegaard, like, you know, it's all about balance, right? And we've lost basically one of our only like creative outlets, or our best creative outlet in Ødegaard. So like a Rice, Merino, Partey midfield, that, like, for me it looks like Merino's going to be, you know, someone who presses, someone who gets through a lot of off the ball work, and then someone who crashes the box a bit, gets on the end of things. I just don't think we're going to see very much of that if he's got like Rice and Partey next to him. I think that's you know, a little bit too stodgy perhaps, and that's exactly why people want Ethan Nwaneri, which I think is very understandable. So yeah, I don't think we are going to see the best of him while Rice and he are the two kind of eights, if that makes sense. And like, I know like Trossard's kind of buzzing around in there as well a little bit, but like, yeah, I just don't think this is going to be the best apparatus to get the best out of him. I think once we've got a little bit more creativity with Ødegaard, and importantly, Saka maybe swinging some of those crosses to the back post from the corner of the area, I think that's when we're probably going to see Merino properly. But also, something we've seen, Elliot, is it tends to take players a bit of time to work that role out, the left 8 role. And, you know, some players kind of never do. Like, it took Havertz some time, it took Xhaka some time to really kind of master it. So we probably got to factor that in as well. But I'm much more interested in what like the Rice, Merino, Ødegaard trio looks like, to be honest.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, I started the season after we signed Merino thinking, great, we can move away from Partey, we can go to a Merino, Ødegaard, Rice midfield. And like at the moment, the one player you feel like you can't take out of the midfield is Thomas Partey, which is not where I expected to be at this point. So we'll just have to see how that changes when Ødegaard comes back. I'll stay with you just for a second, Tim. Leo Trossard takes the penalty and misses it. It's a big moment in the game because I think if he makes it, the game can get a lot easier, and maybe we can do some things for the remainder of the game that maybe lead to other things not happening that wound up happening. We'll get to those as well. But I don't know how much of this is just being wise after the fact. Because he missed it, he shouldn't have taken it. I think people wanted Kai to take it. I would have liked Kai to take it, but for one reason or another, the determination was to let Leo take it. And it's a bad penalty. It's right down the middle. It's saved well with the keeper's feet. I mean, he's maybe a little unlucky. It's a good save in a way because the keeper stays stretched out and his feet get to it. But I'll also confess, I don't think that's a penalty. I wouldn't want it given against us. I think it's a nonsense Champions League handball penalty that, like, there's the expression ball don't lie, right? Like, it's a crappy penalty and then the penalty is missed. So it almost feels fair. But do you have an issue with Leo taking it?
When it was given, I'll be honest, my absolute instant thought was, can we not save the questionable penalty for Sunday? Can we have it on Sunday instead? Like, straight away, I was just like, can we swap it maybe?
We've got Anthony Taylor Sunday, so there's a chance. I'm just saying there's a chance.
So I do have an issue with Trossard taking it over Havertz. Like, unless Havertz specifically said, I'm not feeling it, but like, I don't know how much of. But like, I think if you've got an obviously like really good second penalty taker, I kind of think that's all right. I wasn't hugely confident when Trossard stepped up, to be fair, whereas I would be pretty confident in Havertz. Like, if Jorginho had stepped up, for example, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Like, Jorginho is very good at penalties. And I think when the game states 1-0, like, just let your best man take it, basically. And you're right, like that really, it doesn't change much about like the outcome, but it definitely changes how we feel about it. Like, if we win 2-0 with a slightly questionable penalty, I think everyone's like, that was a bit of a nothing game. But because we win it 1-0 and there's a little bit of jeopardy until the end, it's a bit like, ooh, this on the back of a defeat. We've got Liverpool coming up. Like, it just like gives you the jitters a little bit more. So like, you know, it was an important penalty at the time for the game state, but I also think it quite dramatically changes how we feel about this. Like, it makes don't get me wrong, give it another week and we'll forget this game ever happened. But like, if you win it 2-0, everyone's forgotten it before the final whistle goes. So like, it feels like it just keeps it in your brain a little bit. So yeah, next time, Kai, just step up. You're the penalty taker. Grow up, take it, win the game 2-0. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would have preferred that. And it's so interesting, by the way, that we're at this point now where we just think of Kai as a leader. Kai plays every game. He's such an important player for us. Maybe a reminder with Merino. Like, it's wild that as a fan base, we literally went through this time last year. We thought Kai Havertz was a bust, or not everyone thought that. I mean, we thought he was a work in progress. We weren't sure what was going to happen with him, and look at how far we've traveled. So we have to do that with our new players as well, and give them time to bed in, especially with all the 10 men we've played with and chopping and changing. I think Trossard's one of those weird players. He has scored so many important goals for us. He should be like universally beloved, but because his performances don't always convince, when he doesn't get a goal, it seems like he winds up frustrating. And so I think he divides opinion anyway. But I still trust him to pop up with important goals. And given who's been available, I still think he's a fantastic player for us to have available when needed. There's the Calafiori injury. I don't think we have to go into that now because we're going to talk about it vis-a-vis the Liverpool lineup, and it looks like he might miss a few weeks. So I think there's just one thing left to talk about in this game. I mean, Raya made a couple of or one big save. Other than that, I mean, let's be honest. As nervy as the game started to feel, Shakhtar didn't actually really create much. I wasn't able to watch some of the Champions League yesterday, but I saw that like Inter needed a 90+3 winner against Young Boys. It can just happen, and I don't think it's best to overthink it. Yeah, I think a lot of people came away from this game wishing they had been watching Real Madrid Borussia Dortmund. Like, that's just candidly kind of how it felt. Well, there was like an instant classic taking place at the same time, and we were watching this. But I don't think we can get out of this game without talking Raheem Sterling just a bit. Laura, I'll let you say anything you thought about it, and then I'm going to get it off my chest, and then we'll move on to the Liverpool preview. So what do you think of Sterling?
Can't remember a single thing about Sterling in that game, to be completely honest. I can't remember a single thing.
Okay.
That really is it. That maybe that's harsh. All I remember feeling is frustration, and also I can't recall a single pass made. Maybe I'm being harsh, but that's where I sit.
Well, so let me say this. So I thought he was bright against Bournemouth, and I was sort of disappointed that he was taken off. And now I think I understand why. And I want you guys to check me on this because sometimes I go on a rant and then people just aren't where I am. I watched him walk back defensively when Thomas Partey is running 50 yards on hamstrings that, are taped together, and he's walking back. And they have 2v1s on Partey, and he's like, even as he's starting to get into a position where he could help, he's not helping. And I watched him do it multiple times in this game, which explains to me why he was taken off when we went down to 10 men, not because he couldn't have given us something against Bournemouth, but because I don't think Mikel trusts him to do the running and put in the recovery. And it's a bad sign when in the moment I was very frustrated, and anyone who's not blocked me on Twitter yet knows I sometimes let that frustration come out there. And I said, to hell with it, sub him off. He's not running. He's not defending. The scary thing is that tweet blew up, not from Arsenal, from Chelsea fans laughing and being like, welcome to the experience, Arsenal. So apparently this is, not a new Raheem Sterling experience. So Laura, did you get any sense of that? Am I over-egging this? Because I can forgive players being rusty, not being integrated. You don't kick the ball in the back of the net. That's hard. Chasing back to help Thomas Partey defend when you've just come on, it is not hard. And that's harder for me to forgive not doing,
Yeah, I agree. It's also completely counter to the types of things that he was supposedly saying when we signed him about having a point to prove, wanting to, prove that he still, belongs in the Premier League. None of that is backed up by a performance where you are not putting in the work at all. And he's got away with it because it was Shakhtar. But as you said, I don't think you're the only person that's noticed this. I think there were a few people actually sitting around me in the ground who were pointing out that he was walking. And we were lucky that ultimately there was no sort of actual threat from that. But equally, if you're a player on loan and you are in the shop window to continue your Premier League career, how you think putting in a performance like that is the way to do that, regardless of the opposition, is just not the type of player we want at Arsenal. Maybe we're being a bit harsh here, but the least you can do is try. And that's why I think we are still enamoured with Martinelli, Gabriel Jesus. Even when they're going through a bad patch, they are still really, really trying. Whereas Raheem Sterling, you've got none of that good stocks because you've done nothing for us yet. You do not get to behave like that as a player.
Maybe 8 years ago it wouldn't have stood out, Laura, but like it stands out in this team. And like Martinelli's a great example. The entire game, sprinting, recovering defensively. And like watching someone jog is just, it stands out like a sore thumb, not even jog, just walk. And maybe we're being harsh and, you need to watch it back and judge for yourself. But I know what my eyes saw, and like that stuff, that is frustrating, and frustrating enough that if Saka is not available against Liverpool, like I don't think you can countenance having Raheem Sterling start and helping out what will probably be a makeshift backline defensively. You go with Jesus because at least you're going to get that work rate. So I think we can pivot to discussing the Liverpool game now. And let me just say this: we won. We started well. We faded after playing with 10 men at the weekend. We probably should have won by a few clear goals early on. We didn't. We get the win, and oh, by the way, we are on track to be in the top 8 as it stands. When the counting is done at the end of the league phase, I guess they're calling it. So it is what we needed. Maybe not the emphatic nature of what we wanted, but it is what we needed. And there are going to be times in a season where you just have to take the points, pack up, and move on to the next one. And that's what we do. To get a win in the Champions League before you play Liverpool, like that's a good thing. And I'm glad we were able to do it. So let me just take a beat so that before we start the Liverpool game, I can give you a clear indication that we're moving on to the next part of the pod by doing advertising, because that helps everybody sort of understand dynamically what we're doing. As a reminder, by the way, we now do have Apple subscriptions. And if that is confusing for anyone, if anyone thinks like it doesn't make sense, please email me, contact@arsenalvisionpodcast.com. Again, it allows people who either are unable to sign up for Patreon for payment reasons or don't want to for one reason or another to get all of the pods right in Apple as they always do. But as a reminder, Patreon, you can get all the pods in the Apple app too. So this is really strictly for anybody who needs it, but it's an option there. And if you have any questions, please email me. Happy to answer them. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy. It's just therapy that happens to be online. I've been talking to so many people lately about the importance of therapy, about doing therapy. In fact, one of the people at the event that I was at this week is a therapist, and she was saying just the extent to which she's still trying to break down the stigma around getting help, around therapy, and the number of people that prefer to meet with her virtually because they just don't have the comfort level of going in person, or they can't get in person. If you can't get in a car and drive to an office, if you don't have the time, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the comfort level, then this is a way to access therapy. And it just helps you get curious. I mean, sometimes in life, if you feel like you're stuck and you want to talk through things and get curious about what's out there for yourself, I think therapy is a great way to do it. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. Do it now, Tim. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Yep. Okay. Tim, who's going to play for us on Sunday? Because we have none of the players. It says here, Calafiori injured. It doesn't sound serious, but it does sound like a multi-week deal, a couple of weeks, I think, is what's going around as a rumor. MCL sprain. Could have been worse. Had some people get in touch, say they were worried about ACL based on the video, so we're lucky. And the fact that he came back on and ran around for a minute or two, again, don't like that, Bob.gif, but, not good, Bob? Anywho, picking this lineup is going to be hard. Maybe Saka makes it. That would certainly help boost everybody, but no Saliba, probably no Calafiori, most likely no Timber, certainly no Tomiyasu. No idea how fit Zinchenko is. And Liverpool, while I think they can be beaten in midfield, they definitely have an attack to rival anybody's out there. So what on God's green earth do we do with this lineup, especially defensively?
Yeah, I mean, left back's probably the big question. Well, of course, like Timber as well, because if Timber's fit, then I'm putting him in for Saliba at right centre back. Definitely. Okay. If he's not, no idea what I'm doing, quite frankly. Let's take the left back one first, because I think you can rule Zinchenko out by the fact that he didn't come on in this game, and Lewis Skelly comes on ahead of him. Again, if you're actually interested in Arsenal playing teenagers, like they went for Lewis Skelly over Zinchenko. And so that kind of definitely rules Zinchenko out, doesn't it? I think a lot of people would have been quite nervous to see that anyway. So if that does look like the problem it's going to be. I think it'll probably be Kivior. And I know that Kivior had a bit of a rick at Bournemouth, but I know Clive said this the other week that he kind of looks better on the outside, I think, and I think given the challenge that Salah in particular is going to pose you, then having I guess it's, what do you want there? Do you want like a centre back that's moving to full back, or do you want a midfielder that's moving to full back? And instinctively, I think I'd prefer to go with the centre back moving to full back. And he did play in this fixture last season when Arsenal won, albeit different time. Maybe team was in a different rhythm. There were other bigger players in the team, but he's got form for it. Played in this game, played at Man City, and it was kind of fine. Obviously, there's the caveat that, maybe the team aren't in quite the same shape. Maybe he's not quite in the same shape without Saliba. The defence is going to look quite different, probably anyway. I'm with you, Elliot. I think the substitution of Ben White was about more than just the yellow card. I'm not saying I think he's injured, but I think that was very much done with Sunday in mind, because he has been injured and he's probably not at 100%. But again, some of those guys who we really need and want to take some of these minutes just aren't available to take them. And they never are. So we are having to overstretch some players a little bit. So I imagine that Ben White's substitution was much more about Sunday than the yellow card. And that's just the reason that Arteta gave to the press, particularly because he's facing so many questions about what are you going to do about all these red cards, and probably just a good chance for him to say this, maybe, stuff like this. Instinctively, I'd probably go for Kivior at left back, and I would quite pretty please Jurrien Timber to be fit to play the right-sided centre-back role. But nevertheless, even though I really rate Timber, obviously he's not played there for Arsenal, and we don't often play without Saliba. We haven't played without Saliba in a Premier League game for a good 18 months now. So whoever plays there is going to be a bit of an adjustment, but I think he'd take to it reasonably well. And Liverpool have other threats, obviously, but I think most of us are looking at the left back position the most, and I think that's the one I'll be most interested to see. And there's also an argument that even if Calafiori was playing, he takes some risks at left back, and they don't always come off. And his stock's quite high because he's new at the moment, and also he's adapting to the team and all of that. And I think he'll probably become a bit more judicious, but it wouldn't be risk free with him playing there. I think if everyone was fit in that La La Land, maybe Tomiyasu would come into the reckoning again. But him being fit is La La Land at the moment. So Kivior for me. I think Saka will be fit. I do think, again, I think he probably could have played this game if they really wanted him to, and he won't go anywhere near Preston. So I do think they'll, I appreciate after that we've got 3 really big away games, but I see him playing definitely. I think he could have potentially played this game probably.
Yeah, I mean, we're all understandably worried about what back four we're going to pick. I mean, we defend with our shape as much as with our individuals, and I think we are going to have to lean on that. The one thing I don't want to see is Thomas Partey at right back. I think that works against smaller teams where we have all the possession because he just sort of steps into midfield anyway, but he cannot defend 1v1 on the edges. He cannot defend tricky wingers, and you can't ask him to. It's not, this isn't even a knock on the player. It's just not a fair position to put him in a game that if it gets stretched at all, he has no hope. And you even saw it against Shakhtar. I thought there were times he got isolated a little bit, and it didn't look pretty. So,
him v Diaz would not be pretty. No,
and that's like I said, it's just not fair to ask him to do it. I think I'd rather see Declan Rice at center back than Kivior, candidly. There is just a talent gap there for me, and I'd just play the more talented player if push comes to shove. Now, the irony of that is what that could bring into the frame is an Ethan Nwaneri start. Because if you have to move Declan Rice to the back line, then you're looking at Partey, Merino, and who? And it could be Jorginho. I mean, that is an extremely conservative choice, but it's one that's certainly at his disposal. Or it could be Nwaneri, and you go for it. The really interesting thing for me here, Laura, is, well, let's just finish on defense for a minute. If Timber isn't, and this is why it's so hard not to be frustrated with Tomiyasu. No player wants to be injured. But my gosh, like what a talented player he is and what a valuable player he'd be for this exact situation. You know, if we had to slot him in at center back, I'd have absolutely no worries about it. Without him, it all just looks a little makeshift to me. And I'm not as comfortable with Timber at center back. Not because I don't think he'll be good per se, but I don't think his profile is as a center back particularly. So I prefer not to do that. But do you want to just quickly give me your back four for the game based on what we think might be available?
I mean, Tomiyasu at this stage is a figment of my imagination. He doesn't exist in my stream of Arsenal. He just doesn't feature.
Yeah.
He may as well.
I mean,
We
you're
may
not
as well
wrong.
have sold him. Like
Yeah.
I don't even consider him to be part of this squad, which is a real shame. I saw the suggestion of Declan Rice at centre back earlier on Twitter and didn't hate it. I think for the same reason you said, Elliot, is this is a player who. It's quite hard to pin down, but I think it's just the talent and the ability to win the ball. How he plays in midfield, I think, translates slightly better to that centre back position. But I think I'm right in saying he's never played in. Has he played in a back four at all for Arsenal, let alone at centre back? Don't think so.
Don't think so.
So that feels like a bit of a gamble. But the same is true for Timber. The thing with Timber in the centre back pairing is my perception of him is that he is a little short. Now, I actually don't know if that's true. He feels like one of those kind of very stocky but very, very powerful players. And we have been
he's tall to me, but he is a little short, I think. Yes.
Sorry, let's for all my short kings out there. let's put it in perspective. We are used to playing with two gargantuan centre backs, and I think that has a very positive effect on our team. So slotting in someone with a slightly different profile, how they look, how they move, I think is more disruptive. Declan Rice physically looks a bit closer to Saliba. I mean, I'm really clutching at straws here. This is a hot mess of a back four, and this is the stuff of nightmares. Cannot have Thomas Partey in that. I think it'll be horrible. Mm-hmm. So I think Kiwi all goes in at. I can't speak. I can't do. This is what I don't.
This is what Mikel's going to be dealing with, though, right? It is a really difficult decision, and there are no decisions that he's going to be able to make where someone goes, "Yep, that's it. That's the one." Absolutely. So it's all going to be a little taped together.
I know what I don't want to see. Let's put it that way. Nobody needs to sit through Zinchenko. Nobody needs to sit through that.
It's tough for me, though, because I'll level with you. I actually don't think there's as big a gap between Zinchenko and Kivior defensively as others do. And I think Zinchenko at least gives you some things that in this squad right now we could use. But, I know that's not going to be a popular opinion, so it is what it is.
No, but I think it's a fair one, though, because I think if you look at what they add, Kivior is probably slightly better on the one-on-one. Dubious. Maybe not.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. I know other people would say yes, definitely.
Yeah. So. I think it's just we all have this perception of the mistakes that Zinchenko can make, particularly against the bigger sides. And I think there is very little that he can do to ever shift that away from him.
So the interesting thing here is, and this is the shame of our backline situation being what it is, I would really like to not have to alter midfield. And it's funny, Tim, and by the way, if you want more of a data preview of this game with a Liverpool perspective, Scott Willis has recorded a preview with Dan Kennett, who is a Liverpool supporter and data person. And so we're going to make that available over on Patreon and Apple subscriptions, and that'll be out very, very soon. You can get more of a data slanted and Liverpool slanted perspective, which everybody wants. Tim, if I look at this Liverpool team, I think it is very, very good, candidly. But I think the area of the pitch where I think we could exert some physical dominance is midfield. Mm-hmm. They play Gravenberch is like the steel of their midfield. Szoboszlai and McAllister are in there as well. It's a lot of 8/10s, in that zone of the pitch. And this is where I think we could go with the sideburns guys, as Clive likes to say, like we did against Bournemouth, and have Merino and Rice and Partey, and let Merino and Rice really, I think, try to physically dominate that zone of the pitch, give us that running power, that physical power, win a lot of duels, and try to hit them on the break, on the transition. Obviously, one thing we want as well is to see Martinelli getting isolated against Trent as much as possible. That, that's going to be a critical matchup. But do you agree with me that the sense is their midfield might be lightweight and could be tested? I mean, if you look at the Chelsea game, I don't think they were great. And I think Chelsea was able to win
through them a lot.
Yeah, they were able to win that battle in midfield, play through them, and get them into space. And I think they didn't take their chances as well. And Liverpool, I think, were a little fortunate to come away from that game with a victory. So we know they can always be dangerous because their attackers are just very, very good. But is a priority for Mikel picking a midfield that maybe can be the yin to the yang of Liverpool's midfield?
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of physical matchup against Szoboszlai and McAllister, that's definitely an area that I'm sure Arteta will identify. And if you look at the game they lost this season against Nottingham Forest, I mean, they lose to Forest because Forest move through you very, very quickly. Like Forest have, all the kind of counter-attacking players. Forest's formation is basically they play 7 centre-backs and 4 wingers. That's like how they do things, and they just move through you very, very quickly. And they cause Liverpool a lot of problems doing that, like transitioning through them, playing through them. I'm with you. I think Chelsea did it as well, and I don't think Chelsea's midfield, I mean, like Enzo and Caicedo are good players, but Chelsea's not a game I'd go into like really frightened of their midfield. So that's definitely got to be an area that we should focus on. I agree. And I think the thing is with Trent now, I actually think that's less of a weak spot because he's not really inverting anymore. He's kind of staying where he is. Now, he's still not an absolutely amazing defender, but he's also not popping up in midfield. It's not like the Zinchenko thing of like, well, actually, he's over in central midfield somewhere when we whack the ball over there. Like, he'll be largely where you'd expect a right back to be. So I kind of think that's less of an avenue. Don't get me wrong, I still want Martinelli isolated against him, but he'll be standing there. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. It won't really be green grass. So I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal go for a bit of a transitional game. I appreciate Liverpool are very different now than they were under Jurgen Klopp. They're a bit more patient in possession. But when you look at what we did last year, do you remember we played Jorginho as an 8? And we really asked him to press quite high. And that worked really, really nicely, actually, on the day because Liverpool, even under Klopp, other than Thiago, they never really had like ball players in there. They always had runners in midfield, and actually maybe they've gone like a slightly different way in terms of having Szoboszlai and McAllister. But 100%, like if you try and visualize the team talk, other than like I don't know Arteta hiring some ex-cons or something to tell the players that their families have all been kidnapped and, whatever Arteta's going to come up with as a kind of team bonding thing. If you imagine like, the 3 points on the whiteboard before the game, I'm pretty certain that's going to be one of them for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned Arteta, and I'll just ask you about this, Laura. Mikel made the comment, "Oh, don't worry, we'll be absolutely flying on Sunday." He made a comment after the Shakhtar game. And I don't know who that comment is for. I don't know if that's a frustration that he felt he didn't get from his team what he hoped the last couple of games, or if he felt that the intensity wasn't there, and he's really going to get stuck into them, or if he's just reiterating that like we're going to have what it takes on Sunday. I mean, we do have the 1 extra day's rest, which is nice. We played at home. Liverpool played away. They battered Red Bull a bit and did get the win. But I mean. Do you have any thoughts on that? On Mikel sort of making that point that we'll be flying on Sunday? I mean, like, I have no doubt he'll be able to get the players fired up, but it has felt a little muted. And, there's been, I mean, Clive noted this recently, that there were just some body language things he didn't like with Jesus, a couple of, the way some players trudged off the pitch. I mean, Saliba hasn't looked his imperious self. The mood music, the thing that you can't define with data or with a tactical analysis, but just the sort of mood music feels a little bit somber at the moment. So obviously winning a big game would absolutely be the lift. We're a long way from holding on for a battling point at the Etihad. The vibes could use a lift. So do you think that message from Mikel is for his players, for the fans? I mean, how are you feeling about just sort of the vibes? I mean, I know that's not amazing analysis, but they do feel a little off at the moment.
I feel like, Elliot, you're reading from my tweets, because I literally tweeted after the Shakhtar game and I caught a load of strays from it, basically saying the vibes are off. That's it. The vibes are just off Arsenal. To the quote from Arteta, the way I interpret this is a big game, and we will respond accordingly. If I think back to when we faced Liverpool at home last year, we had just come off of a difficult run. We'd had that sticky patch over Christmas. We'd lost to West Ham. We'd lost to Fulham. And I think the mood is not dissimilar. What I think is really interesting, though, is how one loss and one subpar win, we have flipped the narrative as to how this season is going. So yes, we have made a bit of a mess of beating teams that we perhaps should be coasting past. But if you go back a couple of weeks, it was, well, we're very gritty. We're finding ugly ways to win. This is the sign of champions. We're winning in the last minute, but we're not giving up, etc. We now look at it and go, actually, we're just not playing very well. So the mental gymnastics that is happening to try and understand and diagnose what's happening at Arsenal is really intense. For me, it's just, and I agree with what you said about injuries, but we have had loads of injuries. We have had we are playing without our captain and our best player, and that's why the vibes are off. For me, it really is that simple, and it reminds me again of the period before we played Liverpool earlier this year, so in the previous season. We were all scratching our heads as to why we were not scoring enough goals. We were saying, right, we are dominating. Like the West Ham game, we absolutely dominated, but we didn't score. And so we all went through this absolute rigmarole of, well, do we need a striker, right? No, the answer is very simple. We just need to convert one of these chances. And for me, the simplicity is the same here. We are missing our best 2 players, 3 players. That's it. That's why the vibes are off. So I think we're all scratching our heads for a more philosophical, more meaningful answer, because it gives us comfort that there's something that we can fix. But we can't fix this at the moment. The only way that we can really fix this is to work with what we've got and potentially produce a big win on Sunday. And I think, to Arteta's point, we will be flying because it's a big game, and it has the potential to reignite ourselves. But I wish there was a more obvious technical explanation as to what's happening at Arsenal. But we're playing without our best players. Of course, the vibes are off. End of story. We don't need war and peace analysis on what's going wrong. And I think yes, there will be a big inquisition if we don't beat Liverpool. I think I've seen some headlines of certain members of the press suggesting that there's no way we can win the title if we don't beat Liverpool this weekend, which, I mean, come on now. Yeah. It's October. But yeah, the vibes are off, and I think we are uncomfortable with that as an explanation, but that's all I can offer.
Yeah. Sometimes I think you get too close to a situation and you lose perspective completely, because you're trying to find like micro analysis and really interesting insight, and then the obvious stuff just goes by. You know the meme, the bell curve meme, where there's like a dumb looking person on one side that's like, injuries in hard games are hard, and then there's like, you know, the middle of the meme, and it's like, actually there hasn't been ball progression in midfield that hasn't provided the service necessary for the attackers to be, and then the other side of the bell curve is, actually, injuries in hard games are hard. You know, and it's like, I think we're kind of at that point where, how am I supposed to evaluate a season where we've played some of the hardest fixtures we're going to play all season? We've played with 10 men 3 times. We've had some of our most important players banned or out injured. Like, if you said to me, it's a big game and there are 3 players you can guarantee will be available, the first 3 I'd pick in some order are Saliba, Saka, and Odegaard, and there's a chance all 3 won't be. And yet, whatever happens in the game, no one will point to that and say that explains it. They'll call it a failing of Mikel. They'll call it a failing of recruitment. And no one will point to the obvious thing, which is, how are you expected to win hard games without the talent that elevates you? And over and over and over again, we want to answer flaws in a team by pointing to transfer windows or the manager, and those things matter. I think Mikel is an absolute genius, and I think we've done some great transfer business. The thing that makes teams win more often than not is still talent gaps. Talent is the decider. The reason teams like City can get to 90 points every season, in part, is that Pep is good, but it's because they have the best squad with the best players, with a center forward who can score 40 goals, with a midfielder who might win the Ballon d'Or. Now they don't have him. One player missing. One. And what's everyone saying about City? They're not going to win the title this season. And yet, with no Odegaard and with no Saka, no Saliba, no Rice for a derby, 10 men every game. No one's pointing at us and saying, gosh, there's been a lot of reasons for this. The reasons somehow have to be we didn't recruit right, or we're not picking the right lineup, or a 17-year-old hasn't played. That's it. It's not that Odegaard's missing, it's that we haven't played a 17-year-old. So I just think, candidly, much like last season in a way where we had a stuttering start to the season, then got hot, there's going to be a period this season where Saka and Odegaard and Saliba and Rice and Kai and Merino's bedded in and Timber's back, and we're going to have all these players, and we're going to be definitively and evidently the best team in the league and play like it week in and week out. And the only thing we have to hope is that once that time arrives, we've treaded water well enough that we are right there in the reckoning. Let's face it, the fact that we had become the betting odds favorite for the title is also red meat for a media that will want to tear us down the minute we drop points for any reason. I mean, I was listening to unbelievably stupid stuff coming from people. I think Jonathan Wilson was saying some stuff on a pod about like Mikel's just like too hyperactive and anxious, and that's why Arsenal are dropped. Like the extent to which people are looking for reasons to tear it down, we've just got to find ways to get results through a tricky period where we don't have the best players available. And Tim, I'll sort of wrap it with that and just let you weigh in on this. Like, sure, maybe Nwaneri will help us get through this period. And sure, maybe we could have recruited one extra attacker in the summer, but by and large, I don't see a lot of teams that lose their best players and play with 10 men and go on to do big things. So we got to get players back and play with 11 men. And when we do that, maybe as early as this weekend, I think we can demonstrate that we are still the best team in the league. That's my personal opinion.
Yep, definitely. Like we've cited before, the 11v11 data, even when we've had really difficult games, and looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Best in the league. Just on XG, we are top best team in the league on XG for and against 11v11 this season, despite having played some very difficult fixtures.
Yep, exactly that. And to your point about, talent gaps and all of that, I know people love it when I do this, but like, doing podcasts, a lot of podcasts at the moment about the women's team who are perhaps in a very different stage on the bell curve at the moment, somewhere like quite introspective. And, we do questions on the show and they're all about like the sporting director and the physio.
We've been there, yeah.
Yeah, we've been there. Like you go into the almost overdiagnosis phase, right? You're like, or if we just drop that player and put that player in, everything. And, there's a lot of, and very understandable. And they're not like, they're not stupid questions at all. But I did like one of my big State of the Nation speeches where I was like, a good manager and money solves everything. It just does. So like, don't worry about the sporting director, because if they get the appointment right, they've got money. And if they have a really good coach, they will be sorted. It's fine. And like, because I think we've done on the men's side a lot of post hoc stuff where it's like the strategy is really good and Edu and Arteta are aligned. And I think that's right. But I think those are marginal gains. The reason that Arsenal recovered after a bit of a dodgy period is because they had the money to buy the players they wanted and they have a world-class coach. That solved everything. And that, to your point, Elliot, that is about talent. That is talent gap. We needed the talent in the dugout. Once we had the talent in the dugout, we got the talent on the pitch, and hey presto. Like, I don't think it was really about PowerPoints and synergies. It was about talent, essentially. Yeah. So obviously when you take a deficit in your talent, that's going to hit you. And I think the other thing, do you remember when Saliba was out and the first game Rob Holding played centre-back? We played Leeds at home. We beat them 4-1. And everyone was like, oh, maybe this won't be so bad. And I remember saying on that podcast, give it another 4 or 5 games and let's see where we are. And I think we've kind of hit that maybe with the Odegaard thing, where it's like we came up with a solution, but those solutions do tend to be quite short term. Obviously, we've lost Saka as well, which kind of blows things up a little bit. But like, yeah, I do think we've just hit that period where we just need to get a bit healthy and just try and get through it. And that happens in a season. And in the first half of the season, generally speaking, no one looks great. The rhythm of the fixture list, the early rounds of cups, group stage games, like. The early season is quite fractured. And for me, it's just about staying in touch if you aspire to win the title. Go and look at our last 3 league wins. Look where we were in the table on Christmas Day. Not higher than 3rd for any of our last 3 league title wins. So, but to that point, that does make Sunday important, because if we lose, then maybe that staying in touch part, it starts to look in jeopardy.
Yeah, and anyone who needs, who doubts that it's about talent, just look at how Real Madrid beat Dortmund the other day, right? Like, this wasn't a Carlo Ancelotti masterclass. This is Vinicius Jr. just being like, I'll just score all the goals. How about I just do that? How about I just do a bunch of goals and then we win? Like, sometimes you need that. And like our player who does that for us, Bukayo Saka, he's out injured. Surprise, surprise. Like, we don't look as effective in that part of the pitch. I think the other player who can do that for us, by the way, is Odegaard. We've seen Odegaard have games where he just gets his foot on the ball and does unbelievable stuff. Playing without both of them, like, yeah, it is what it is. So I don't want to belabor this point that I've just belabored, but like, we need that talent back. And when it does come back, it's going to look phenomenal again. The question is how we get through that period. And I think Tim's point is the most important, which is you can be without an important player or two for a game or two and get by. It's over time, over the aggregation of games, eventually that the deficit tells, right? There's a reason that mid-table teams can be like top of the table till like October, and then by January they're in like ninth, because eventually they don't have the staying power. And so you need that talent. I'll finish with you, Laura. What's going to happen on Sunday? And please be accurate. We'll be holding you to this.
Okay. Right. I'm going to go with a 1-0 Arsenal win.
Wow. I'll take it.
Ish.
And
I don't care if it's at one of our dirtiest, most undeserved 1-0 victories ever. Preferably we get a really, really unfair decision in our favour, just because I would just love to see the meltdown afterwards. 1-0 Arsenal. Yeah, 1-0 Arsenal.
Odegaard limps onto the pitch in a boot, handles the ball, limps back off the pitch. Taylor doesn't call anything, and we go on to win.
Yeah. Correct. Ideally.
I have to do a Simpsons kind of reference here, but there's an episode where like there's a kicker who has like a foot injury and he kicks the winning field goal and his leg just flies off. Odegaard to do that, to come on, take a free kick. We win 1-0, but unfortunately his whole leg comes off. But what a scrappy 1-0 win fixture this weekend last season. Man City at home. Gabriel Martinelli, 85th minute, deflected winner. Take it all day.
I'm going to go for 5-1 Arsenal. I just think it screams 5-1 Arsenal. It just, because nobody believes it could happen. It can't happen. But I would take it. I'd take 5-1, even though I'd prefer a clean sheet. Okay. I think we can leave it there for now. We've got the Dan Kennett Scott episode coming out later today. We've got 3 big questions with Phil tomorrow. We've got an instant reaction, obviously, on Sunday, and a main pod again on Monday. And we all look, we're white knuckling it. You ever done that when you're driving? Like, you're tired, you lost focus, it's dark out, it's raining, and you're white knuckling it. Like, we're white knuckling it right now, but there will be clearer skies and straighter roads and smoother sailing. That mixed metaphor. You get the idea. We'll leave it there. Laura's on Twitter at Laura Kirk 12. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming back on. And remember, if it's not 1-0 to the Arsenal, you know where to send the blame. Tim's on Twitter at Stominator. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
My name is, it says here, Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. We love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Liverpool 0.